Today's quiz is as following. You have a large area to reforest, and the question is how to optimize the distribution of trees in this large area, assuming that you will not have the resources to take care of the trees on one basis. You will not be able to, or you'll be very limited to give water, to give fertilizers, etc. So the idea is to find the best configuration, to have something which will be growing well and autonomous in the way they will grow, assuming that you will plant at the start of the rainy season, etc., etc. So there are three categories of trees. There are the leguminous, which are nitrogen fixing. They are supportive species for the forest to fertilize the forest. You have fruit trees, which are productive trees. Okay, so it's F. Leguminous will be L on the drawing, and you have a T like timber or madeira dale in Portuguese. And so there are three different types of configuration. In this configuration, if you look it closely, you have T timber, which is in the middle. Then you have an area of a circular area of leguminous. Then you have some fruit trees. The same here, the same configuration. And there are clusters separated from each other. On this scenario 2, and this was scenario 1, in scenario 2 you have a distribution of the trees in a bit like random distribution. Fruit trees, leguminous, timber distributed. And here you have more like, let's say, very geometrical structure with lines. Here you have leguminous, here you have timber, then you have some fruit trees, and then fruit trees, etc. So it's a bit random in the sense that the distribution here is not regular, but you have these lines very symmetrical and arranged. So the question is, what would be the best scenario to plant your trees in such let's say, situation where you don't have so many resources, just want to plant trees and you don't have a lot of resources to take care of the trees. You expect the trees to once they are settled, to be able to survive droughts or to grow in a good way, etc., etc. So that I'll let you have a look and think, and choose the solution you think it's the best, 1, 2, or 3. And I will come back later to explain which one, in my opinion, would be the best and for what reasons. So before to go to the solution, it's necessary to pose some concept, and particularly the concept of synergy. The definition of synergy is that the interaction of two or more agents or forces is an interaction so that their combined effect of these agents and forces is greater than the sum of their individual effects. A very used example is the following. You have a big rock, like 1 cubic meter, I don't know, of a rock, a ball of rock. And someone tried to push the rock, and he cannot do it because it's too heavy. But then comes second person, and both of them will try to move the rock. They cannot do it. And then arrives the third person, and suddenly they can move the rock. So if you take the sum of individual effect is null, because one person will try, will not succeed. The second person will try alone and will not succeed, etc. But when you combine the force of the three persons, then you have the capability to move the rock. So if you consider the association, the interaction of these three forces, you will create a new particularity, a new quality, a new strength that didn't exist before. So this example is an example based on let's say quantity. So if you have one person doesn't work, two person doesn't work, and three will work. So in terms of quantity, when you add some quantity, you will pass a certain threshold, and you are able to do something that you were not able to do before. There is another example which I prefer, which is not so much based on quantity, but more on quality. And that's the next example. So the example of synergy based on quality, on specificity of the agent or the force you put together, can be illustrated with the following example. Imagine you have a tree, which is a fruit tree, okay? And besides this fruit tree, you have, for example, a leguminous. Let's say it will be a different kind of tree. So you have two different, let's say, agents, which have different specificities. Usually the fruit trees are trees which are able to produce a lot of sugars, suc, and so they produce a lot of carbohydrate. And in this configuration, the leguminous tree has works with bacteria which are nitrogen fixing, and they will produce a lot of nitrogen for the soil. So what will happen is that the nitrogen tree, with the help of, for example, mycorrhiza, these mushrooms on the soil, will give some nitrogen, and the fruit trees maybe will give some carbohydrate. So in this case, there will be a complementary interaction, so that the pair of trees working together will be able to produce more, because one will give something, the other one will give something else, and there will be a win-win situation where the sum of the two will be greater than the sum of individual, just adding individual effect. So in this case, it's not so much about quantity, it's more about quality or specificity, a complementary function of this pair of trees. If we go further, we could say that, okay, let's add another, let's say, for example, a vine. Here we have a vine, we add a vine. Here we have some small plants or plants here. So what we see happening is that we start to have something which is different, which is not anymore two trees and a vine and two understory plants, but more like a beginning of a small forest. And what will be the addition of this, let's say, conglomerate of agent, of trees, will be that the humidity will go higher. Maybe the fruit tree will give some shade to protect the small understory tree. They will start to have really a lot of biomass developing. The soil will develop more microorganisms. Maybe in the tree there will be some habitat for predator of insect which would usually damage the understory tree, etc. So you start to see appearing complex system which has more, let's say, potential, more resilience, more capacity to grow together. That's the Darwin. When you have an ecosystem, when things work together, and plants adapt to each other, adapt to the ecosystem in the best way, the system will thrive. So in this configuration, the complexity will really create a different type of synergy, which will be forest synergy. So to go further in the example of this quiz, what we could say is that the fact to have a cluster of plants together will give more strength, will give more protection. During the night, the temperature will be higher. During the day, the temperature will be lower, etc., etc. So, and the photosynthesis will be better, etc. So, in this case, we can see that a cluster of trees has really an advantages over disseminated individual trees as individuals. So now that the concept of synergy has been explained, you can guess that on this scenario, on this quiz, the best solution will be this solution. The same number of trees and this and this. This will create cluster of trees which will be which behavior will be forest-like. And they will really shelter the production of seedlings. Every time there will be new seeds and seedlings. They will be protected. They will be able to grow. Although in this situation, what will happen is that they are like all individuals and very fragile in relationship with the weather, the drought, the heavy rain, etc. So in this situation, this will start to grow. Every cluster will start to grow, and at some point, they will touch, and they will form like a bigger cluster, and then the forest will go on. If you want to manage and to help this system to grow, you can even imagine to create corridors in between. Corridors have an effect of allowing a bigger niche for the fauna, for the biodiversity, by making bigger the habitat and let's say the hunting area of different species. When you have a forest like that as well, it's more protected. So what will happen is that you will attract many animals which will bring seeds, and the seeds will fall on the floor. It will add some biodiversity because you will get seeds from other ecosystems, etc., etc. In this situation, what will happen is that every tree is let alone. They're in a fragile situation. There is no cooperation. In this situation, if you start to have mycorrhizae, this fungus on the soil which make a network of nutrient distribution, they will be more quickly settled to help each cluster. In this situation, we have a bit the same configuration than here, is that everything is a bit individual. It will take time to connect. So, yeah, that's the solution. Now, what we can consider is what are the different specificity of each system. Because when you make reforestation, either you do it for repopulating an endemic vegetation, or you do it for maybe in philosophy of permaculture, where you want to have, for example, fruit forest, or a forest which will produce fruits and timber, etc., etc. So we will analyze further in the three different systems what are the specificities. So let's compare the tree system. In a production perspective, I don't know if you noticed, but the T, like timber trees, meaning that the trees which we use for the wood and to build a house or whatever construction it could be. Here in this scenario are in the middle of the cluster. Why? Because when you grow a timber tree, you need to make sure that the tree will grow really straight and up. If you start to put your trees, timber trees, in an area where there is wind, or the tree will try to find its way to the light on bending itself. For example, if I would have put a timber tree on the hedge, what will happen if the sun is going this way, or this way? It would have started to grow that direction to take the sun light which is going from that direction. So to avoid that kind of let's say bending of the structure of the tree, the trunk of the tree needs to be very straight and needs to go very like straight up. So in this configuration, the timber tree I will really put in the middle. So these trees will protect from the winds. You can imagine that you can choose the different species of trees so that the timber tree will be protected by trees which are maybe very efficient against wind, like a strong foliage, or like higher than the timber tree, etc. In this situation, it's a bit chaotic. So there is no, let's say, objective, and it will be a bit random growth of timber trees. In this situation, you can start to manage the protection of timber trees, so that maybe the timber tree will be on a situation where they are protected from the wind on each side, and as well that the trees which are surrounding the timber tree has the same height. So because if you start to have a tree which are, for example, leguminous here, which is going very high, and here which is going slower, what will happen is that the timber tree will start to go that direction to get the sunlight. So that's a configuration choice, and timber tree has this particularity that it needs to be let's say taken care in a way that they will really grow straight. In this situation, I put the leguminous in the first inner circle. Doesn't really matter. The idea of having leguminous trees is more like to spread them around. In the forest succession, what you do usually when you reforest, you start with 80% of leguminous and 20% of productive trees in terms of biomass. And when the forest will settle, will start to be more mature, the ratio will inverse, and you will have 20% of leguminous still to produce nitrogen, but with the idea is that the forest will be more complex, and we'll have more like 80% of productive trees, like timber and fruit trees. So that configuration here is more about let's say the size of the trees, how you want to position every tree based on the sun course, based on the wind, etc., etc. Another effect is let's say objective is to, if you do a food forest for permaculture, you need to ease the process of harvesting. You can imagine that timber tree you will have harvest every I don't know, 20 or 30 years, depending on the kind of tree, the species. But for the fruit, you will appreciate if it's quite easy to harvest. So it's up to you to make maybe some alleys inside there, or to have a different circle of let's say harvesting paths. In this configuration, you can imagine that it's quite easy to harvest, because it's, you can even use a kind of machine. So yeah, that's a solution. That's a possibility. As well, if you do like agroforestry, maybe you want to mix crops and trees. So this situation is more like a food forest, and this situation is more like a mixture between crop and let's say hedges, which are made of trees, but could be any kind of trees. In this situation, then you can start to think about if you have a machinery, although permaculture is not very fond of using petrol, but if you are more in temperate climate and where it's really more crop orientated, then you could imagine to have alley where a machine could pass between two edges of trees, like 7 meters of a distance, to be able to let a machine goes there. After you have to analyze the kind of trees you put there, the root system, some practice, for example, cut when the trees are young, they cut the main roots so that they will not invade this internal alley, so that the crops which will be in between will not be impacted by the competition with trees, etc., etc. So we have the objective would be very much depending on what kind of management process you want to set up in the future for I think taking the fruit, taking the production and using the production. But if you want to just reforest and make a food forest, that's the best configuration. If you want to make like really alley cropping, I would say that this configuration is really good. After, you can make a mix between that and that, making that not only you don't have to be very let's say simple, but more make a complex system. You could have a small forest here, a small forest, and replace the trees by maybe a cluster. And if you have a large area, you could afford to have like a cluster of trees, cluster of trees, etc., and an alley in between. So that will be more performing in terms of biodiversity, and that would be a really interesting scenario to develop. This, I would say, is more like if you have a small area. Then if you have a small area, you can afford to do that, because every day you will go, you will have your path, you will see your plantation, and you will add water, you will add fertilizer, etc. This is really for small areas. But if you want to reforest on a big area, that's this solution. To finish this video, there was a study from the university which showed that this system is the most efficient. They didn't try to make any, let's say, preconceived idea about the choice. They just make some tested, and they saw that this system is the most efficient to have a resilient, autonomous, self-growing forest, and to produce end result which is really more productive. Just to make it clear, permaculture is about learning, and so this configuration I'm talking about is really maybe in the perspective of tropics, although this alley cropping is more like temperate paradigm. I really welcome any kind of comments in the video, about the video, and your experience, and these are complex systems, and ecosystem is complex. So if you have ideas, if you have, let's say, if you want to make your point on some specific situation, specific ecosystem, specific situation, just be free to add your comment. Okay, thank you.